An orphan shared his lunch with a beggar, not knowing the beggar was a millionaire in disguise. This single act of kindness, offered from emptiness rather than abundance, would alter the course of both their lives forever. The rain fell in sheets across the city streets, turning the world gray and washing away the boundaries between sidewalk and gutter. 12-year-old Elijah huddled deeper into his worn jacket, the fabric long since surrendered to threadbare patches at the elbows. His shoulders hunched against both the weather and the weight of another day navigating life at St. Catherine's Home for Children, a place that provided walls and a roof but had never quite managed to feel like home. The plastic bag containing his lunch pressed against his side, protected beneath his jacket. 2 slices of white bread with a thin spread of peanut butter. An apple with a bruised spot he'd carefully cut around this morning. A small carton of milk he'd saved from breakfast. Not much, but it was his. In the world of St. Catherine's, where possessions were communal and privacy a luxury, these small claims of ownership mattered. School had ended early, a burst pipe flooding the east wing, and now Elijah found himself with unexpected free hours before he needed to return to the home. Freedom, however brief, tasted sweeter than any dessert they might serve tonight. He ducked beneath the awning of a closed bookshop, shaking water from his dark curls. His stomach rumbled, but he ignored it. Lunch could wait. Freedom couldn't. 3 blocks down, past the convenience store where the owner watched orphans with suspicious eyes, Elijah found his destination. The public library rose like a stone promise, its steps slick with rain, but its lights warm through tall windows. Inside waited worlds beyond St. Catherine's, beyond the pitying glances of teachers and the whispers of classmates. Inside waited stories where orphans discovered they were wizards, or found doors to magical worlds, or uncovered their royal heritage. Inside, for a few hours, he could forget what he was. As he approached the steps, Elijah noticed a figure huddled in the alcove beside the entrance. An elderly man sat with his back against the stone, partially sheltered from the downpour. His clothes, once decent but now worn and stained, hung loosely on his thin frame. A small cardboard sign rested against his leg, its message smudged by raindrops. "Anything helps. God bless." Elijah slowed his pace. He'd seen homeless people before. They were fixtures in the city landscape. But something about this man caught his attention. Perhaps it was the way he sat with his spine straight despite his circumstances, or how his eyes, a startling clear blue, seemed to look beyond the rain to something distant and remembered. Their eyes met briefly, and Elijah felt a jolt of recognition, though he was certain they'd never crossed paths before. The man offered a slight nod, not asking for anything, just acknowledging another soul in the rain. Elijah nodded back before hurrying up the library steps. Inside, the quiet embrace of books and silence welcomed him. He found his favorite corner by the fantasy section and settled into the worn armchair that seemed to remember his shape. But today, the words on the pages couldn't transport him. His mind kept returning to the blue-eyed man in the rain. His fingers found the lunch bag, tracing its outline through his jacket. 2 slices of bread, a cut apple, a carton of milk. Not much, but it was his. Not much, but it was his. The phrase echoed, catching on something deeper than hunger. He'd been 7 when his mother died. A slow decline that hospital visits and medications couldn't reverse. 5 years of institutional care had taught him to guard what little he could call his own, to hold tight to any scrap of autonomy. Sharing meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant pain. And yet, Elijah closed his book and stood, decision made before he fully understood it. He approached the front desk where Ms. Chen, the librarian who always remembered his name, looked up with a smile. "Leaving already, Elijah? The storm's still going strong. Just stepping out for a minute," he replied, gesturing vaguely toward the entrance. "I'll be back." The rain had intensified, drumming against the pavement with renewed determination. Elijah paused beneath the library's covered entrance, gathering courage. The man remained where he'd been, though he'd pulled his legs closer to his chest, making himself smaller against the weather. Elijah descended the steps. Each footfall seemed to echo with his mother's voice. "Be kind, Eli. The world needs more kindness than it gets." He stopped before the man, rain splashing against his sneakers. Up close, he noticed details he'd missed. The man's hands, though weathered, were clean with neatly trimmed nails. His beard, while untamed, appeared recently washed. And those eyes, they held a sharpness that belied his circumstances. "Excuse me, sir." Elijah's voice came out smaller than intended. The man looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Yes, young man." Elijah reached into his jacket and withdrew the lunch bag, now slightly crumpled. "I thought, maybe you'd like this." It's not much, just a sandwich and an apple and some milk. For a moment, the man didn't move. Then a smile transformed his face, erasing years and hardship in an instant. That's extraordinarily kind of you. His voice carried unexpected warmth and a hint of an accent Elijah couldn't place. Would you care to join me? I find meals are better with company. Hesitation tugged at Elijah. Return to the library's safety, his instincts urged. But something about the man's gentle invitation felt more compelling than caution. Okay, he agreed, settling beside the man, careful to keep some distance between them. I'm Elijah. A pleasure to meet you, Elijah. You may call me Thomas. The man's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Thomas Green. Elijah divided the sandwich, apologizing for its simplicity. Thomas accepted his half with a nod of thanks that somehow made the meager offering feel like something of value. Where do you go to school? Thomas asked, taking small, appreciative bites of the sandwich. Jefferson Middle. We got out early today because of flooding. Ah, an unexpected holiday. The best kind. Thomas's eyes twinkled. And what do you enjoy studying, Elijah? The question startled him. Adults usually asked if he was behaving or about his grades, not what he enjoyed. I like reading, and science sometimes. When we get to do experiments instead of just textbook stuff, a curious mind. The world belongs to the curious. Thomas took a sip of the milk, passing the carton back to Elijah. And where is home for you? The question landed like a stone in still water. Elijah studied the cracked concrete beneath them. See, Catherine's. It's a home for kids who don't have anywhere else. Understanding dawned in Thomas's eyes, but Elijah saw no pity there. Only a thoughtful recognition. I see. And how long have you been at St. Catherine's? 5 years, Elijah answered, surprised by his own willingness to share this information with a stranger. Since my mom died, my dad was never around. Thomas nodded slowly. I lost my parents young as well. It reshapes a life, doesn't it? Like redirecting a river. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain creating a private world around them. Elijah offered Thomas half the apple, which he accepted with a grateful nod. May I tell you something, Elijah? Thomas asked, turning the apple slice in his weathered hands. When I was about your age, perhaps a bit older, I was very hungry once. Truly hungry, the kind that makes your vision blur at the edges. A woman noticed me sitting outside a cafe. She bought me a sandwich. Nothing fancy, just cheese and tomato. But she sat with me while I ate it. She didn't ask questions. She just provided company. Human connection. I never saw her again, but I've never forgotten her kindness. Elijah nodded, understanding. Sometimes a single moment of being seen, truly seen, could illuminate whole stretches of darkness. Do you come to the library often? Thomas asked, changing the subject with gentle precision. Whenever I can, Elijah admitted. I like the quiet, and nobody bothers you about what you're reading or how long you've been sitting in one spot. Books were my salvation as a boy, Thomas said, his accent becoming more pronounced with memory. I traveled the world through pages long before I could afford a train ticket. They finished their modest meal as the rain began to ease, sunlight piercing through thinning clouds. Elijah realized he'd spent nearly an hour in conversation with this stranger, who somehow didn't feel strange at all. I should go back inside, he said, gathering the lunch wrappings. Before they wonder where I went, Thomas straightened his posture, wincing slightly as he shifted position. Thank you for the meal, Elijah, and more importantly, for your company. Both were nourishing in their own way. Elijah stood, suddenly awkward. Will you be okay? The question felt both necessary and insufficient. Thomas's smile returned, enigmatic and warm. I believe I will be, and I think our paths may cross again, young man. As Elijah turned to leave, Thomas spoke again. Elijah, that book under your arm, The Secret Garden, it was one of my favorites as a boy. The idea that forgotten things might still flourish with care, it's quite powerful, isn't it? Surprised, Elijah looked down at the novel he'd nearly forgotten he was carrying. Yeah, I'm rereading it for the 3rd time. The best books deserve multiple visits. Thomas nodded approvingly. Go enjoy it, and thank you again. Back inside the library, Elijah settled into his armchair, but the words on the page blurred before him. His thoughts kept returning to Thomas, a man with educated speech and knowledge of classic literature, reduced to sitting in the rain with a cardboard sign. Life could be strange and cruel in its turns. For the next week, Elijah found himself looking for Thomas whenever he passed the library. But the alcove remained empty, and he tried to push away the nagging worry about what had become of the gentle-spoken man who knew the secret garden. On Friday afternoon, as Elijah trudged back to Sane, Catherine's Mrs. Winters, the home's director, intercepted him at the entrance. Her perpetually worried expression deepened into something more serious. "Elijah, please come to my office. There's someone here to see you." His stomach dropped. In 5 years, no one had ever come to see him. Not relatives. Not friends of his mother. No one. "Am I in trouble?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Mrs. Winters' expression softened slightly. "No, not at all. Just come along, please." Her office door stood partially open. Elijah could see a man's profile as he gazed out the window. Tall, straight-backed, in what appeared to be an expensive suit. For one wild moment, Elijah thought it might be his father, returned after all these years. Then the man turned and Elijah froze in the doorway. It was Thomas, but transformed. Gone was the ragged beard, replaced by a neatly trimmed salt and pepper goatee. The worn clothes had given way to a tailored charcoal suit, but the eyes remained unchanged. That same clear blue that seemed to see right through pretense. "Hello, Elijah," Thomas said, his voice familiar, yet somehow more substantial in these surroundings. "It's good to see you again." Mrs. Winters glanced between them. "You two know each other?" "We shared a meal recently," Thomas replied smoothly. Elijah was kind enough to offer his lunch to a stranger in the rain. It was quite possibly the most genuine act of generosity I've witnessed in decades. Confusion swirled through Elijah's mind. "But you were..." "I thought..." Thomas smiled. "Yes, I imagine this is rather surprising. Please sit down. I have quite a story to tell you, if you're willing to hear it." Elijah sat slowly on the edge of the chair opposite Mrs. Winters' desk, his backpack still clutched to his chest like a shield. "My name is Thomas Green," he began. "And while I did indeed lose my parents young, as I told you, what I didn't share is what came after. I was fortunate enough to be adopted by a couple who owned a small technology company. They gave me love, education, and eventually a place in their business. When they passed, the company became mine. Over the next 30 years, I built it into something substantial." Mrs. Winters cleared her throat. "Mr. Green is being modest, Elijah. He's the founder of Green Tech Innovations. It's one of the largest technology companies in the country." The information refused to align with the man who had sat beside him in the rain, accepting half a peanut butter sandwich with genuine gratitude. "But why were you..." Elijah couldn't finish the question. Thomas's expression grew thoughtful. 3 months ago, I was diagnosed with a heart condition. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but a reminder of mortality nonetheless. It prompted some reflection about what I've built, what I've achieved, and what truly matters." He paced slowly before the window. "I've spent decades in boardrooms and first-class lounges, but I've grown increasingly disconnected from the world as it actually exists for most people." He turned back to Elijah. "So I began an experiment. 1 week each month, I set aside my identity, my resources, my privileges, and I live on the streets. I observe, I listen, I experience in some small way vulnerability. It's been educational. That's why your hands were clean," Elijah realized aloud. "And why you talk the way you do," Thomas smiled. "Perceptive. Yes, I maintain certain standards even in my beggar persona. But what I've learned has been invaluable. About society, about compassion, about human nature." His expression softened. "Which brings me to you, Elijah." Mrs. Winters shifted in her seat, her expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Mr. Green has made an unusual request regarding you, Elijah. One that I felt you should hear directly from him." Thomas sat in the chair beside Elijah's, turning to face him directly. "In my time on the streets, I've been ignored, feared, pitied, occasionally assisted with visible reluctance, and rarely treated with genuine kindness. What makes your action remarkable wasn't just sharing your food, but your willingness to share your time, your story, your humanity. You saw a person, not just a problem." He leaned forward slightly. "I would like to establish a scholarship fund in your name, one that would cover your education through college. And I would like to become your mentor, to meet with you regularly, to offer guidance and support as you grow. Not to replace family, but to provide another connection in your life." Elijah stared, words escaping him completely. His world, so defined by what was missing, what was lost, suddenly seemed to be expanding in impossible ways. "Why?" he finally managed. "Just because I gave you half a sandwich?" Thomas's laugh was warm and genuine. "Because in a world where people walk past suffering every day, you stopped. Because you gave not from excess, but from your own limited resources. And because I saw in you something rare and worth nurturing, Natural compassion paired with intelligence? The world needs more of both. Mrs. Winters spoke gently. This is a lot to take in, Elijah. You don't need to decide anything immediately. Mr. Green understands that. Indeed, Thomas agreed. Take time to think. Ask questions. Be skeptical even. That's healthy. I've left my contact information, and Mrs. Winters has verified my identity and intentions. He stood smoothing his jacket. For now, I simply wanted to meet properly and express my appreciation for our library conversation. It meant more than you know. As Thomas prepared to leave, Elijah found his voice again. The book, you really did read The Secret Garden? Thomas's eyes crinkled at the corners. Many times. Where you tend a rose, a thistle cannot grow. One of many lines I've carried with me through life. After Thomas departed, Mrs. Winters explained the details of his proposal more fully. Monthly meetings, educational assistance, career guidance, all without any obligation for Elijah to pursue any particular path. It's quite extraordinary, she admitted. In 22 years working with children in care, I've never seen anything quite like it. That night, Elijah lay awake in his narrow bed, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the 3 other boys who shared his room. His life, so predictable for 5 years, had suddenly acquired new dimensions, new possibilities. It terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. 2 days later, he sent his answer through Mrs. Winters, yes. His first official meeting with Thomas took place the following Saturday. Not in an imposing office or elegant restaurant, but at the public library where they'd first shared lunch. Thomas arrived without fanfare, dressed casually but impeccably, carrying a leather messenger bag that he handled with obvious care. I thought we might start with books, Thomas explained, unzipping the bag to reveal several volumes. I've brought a few that shaped my thinking at your age. You're under no obligation to like them, of course. Honest opinions are far more valuable than agreement. They spent 2 hours discussing literature, science, and Thomas's travels around the world. Elijah found himself forgetting the man's wealth and status, drawn instead to his stories and the attentive way he listened when Elijah spoke. As their meeting ended, Thomas handed Elijah a small package. This is for you, not for sharing our meal. That kindness has no price, but as a tool for our future conversations. Inside was a smartphone, sleek, expensive, and already programmed with Thomas's contact information. This is too much, Elijah protested. It's practical, Thomas countered. You can reach me with questions between our meetings. You can research topics we discuss. And yes, you can play games and watch videos too. I'm not completely out of touch with what 12-year-olds enjoy. Over the following months, their weekly meetings became a cornerstone in Elijah's life. They explored museums and historical sites. They visited GreenTech's headquarters, where Elijah witnessed the respect and genuine affection Thomas's employees held for him. Sometimes they simply walked through city parks, discussing everything from quantum physics to the perfect recipe for chocolate chip cookies. Gradually, Thomas began introducing additional opportunities. Tutors to help strengthen Elijah's academic foundations. Weekends spent at Thomas's country house, where Elijah learned to swim, to identify constellations, to plant a vegetable garden. Each experience expanded his world, but more importantly, each reinforced the message that he mattered, that his thoughts, his interests, his potential were worthy of investment. At school, teachers noticed the change. The quiet, withdrawn orphan who'd avoided attention began participating in class discussions, joining clubs, even organizing a food drive inspired by his own experience with hunger. His grades improved, not because anyone demanded it, but because curiosity had been awakened and nurtured. At St. Bermido Catherine's, however, things grew more complicated. Some staff members viewed the relationship with suspicion. Why had this wealthy man singled out one ordinary orphan? Other children alternated between envy and attempt to befriend Elijah, solely to access the opportunities he now enjoyed. One particularly difficult evening, after enduring taunts about being Charity Case of the Year, Elijah called Thomas, voice thick with hurt and confusion. Perhaps I've made things harder for you. Thomas acknowledged, concern evident even through the phone. That was never my intention. It's not your fault, Elijah insisted. It's just different now. I'm different. I don't fit the same way I used to. Growth often feels that way, Thomas said gently. When we expand beyond old boundaries, it can be uncomfortable for everyone involved. The following week, Thomas arrived for their regular meeting with a more serious expression than usual. I've been thinking about our conversation, he began as they walked through the botanical gardens. About belonging and where you fit in the world. Elijah tensed, fearing Thomas had reconsidered their arrangement. "I've discussed something with Mrs. Winters," Thomas continued. "It would be a significant change and entirely your decision. But I wanted to present the option." He paused beside a reflecting pool, watching koi fishes swim lazy circles beneath lily pads. "Would you consider coming to live with me, Elijah? Not as a replacement for your mother, or even as a traditional adoption at this point, but as a guardian relationship that could evolve as we both adjust?" Elijah stopped walking entirely, certain he'd misheard. "You want me to live with you? Like, permanently? That would be my hope, yes. But we could start with a trial period, perhaps the summer months, to see if the arrangement suits us both. I have a spare bedroom that sat empty for too long, and Mrs. Winters believes the stability might benefit you." Words failed. In their place, tears rose unexpected and unstoppable. 5 years of contained grief, of adapting and surviving and never quite belonging anywhere, suddenly breached their carefully maintained dam. Thomas neither spoke nor offered physical comfort, simply standing present and unwavering as Elijah processed emotions too complex for words. "Why are you doing all this?" Elijah finally asked, wiping his eyes with embarrassment. "It can't just be because of a sandwich." Thomas considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "The sandwich was a window, Elijah, one that allowed me to glimpse who you are. What I saw was a young man whose circumstances haven't diminished his capacity for kindness. That's remarkably rare." He gazed across the gardens. "I have built companies, developed technologies, accumulated wealth beyond anything my younger self could have imagined. Yet I find myself without family, without legacy beyond patents and profit margins." His eyes, when they returned to Elijah, held a vulnerability the boy hadn't seen since that rainy day by the library. "Perhaps I'm being selfish. Perhaps I'm looking for meaning as I face my own mortality. But I believe we could offer each other something valuable. You with your fresh perspective and natural compassion, me with my experience and resources. A fair exchange between equals, despite our different starting points." Summer arrived, and with it Elijah's temporary move to Thomas's home. A spacious but not ostentatious brownstone filled with books, art from his travels, and surprising touches of whimsy, a mechanical chess set that moved pieces on verbal command, a kitchen gadget that made pancakes in the shape of famous scientists. The transition wasn't without challenges. Elijah struggled with the abundance after years of institutional scarcity. He hoarded snacks in his room, wore the same clothes despite having new options, and approached each day with the wariness of someone expecting it all to vanish. Thomas neither criticized nor tried to hurry this adaptation. Instead, he established routines that provided structure while gradually expanding Elijah's comfort zone. They cooked meals together, Thomas teaching culinary skills his own adoptive mother had passed to him. They maintained a shared calendar on the refrigerator, making Elijah's days predictable, yet filled with meaningful activities. Most importantly, Thomas carved out uninterrupted time each evening. No phones, no business calls, no distractions. When they could talk, play games, or simply coexist in comfortable silence. By August, when the trial period was officially ending, the question of returning to St. Catherine's felt almost absurd to them both. Paperwork for formal guardianship was filed, with the possibility of adoption left open for future consideration. "This doesn't erase your mother," Thomas assured Elijah as they prepared his room for the school year ahead. "Her place in your heart remains yours alone. I'm not replacing anyone, just adding my presence to your story." As fall approached, bringing with it Elijah's 13th birthday, Thomas proposed something unexpected. "I'd like to take you back to the library steps," he said over breakfast, "where we first met. I think it's important to remember beginnings." On a clear September morning, they sat side by side on those same stone steps, though in vastly different circumstances than their first encounter. "I have something to confess," Thomas said, gazing at the library entrance. "The day we met wasn't entirely chance. I'd actually been watching Catherine's for several weeks as part of my street experiment. I'd noticed you specifically, how you carried yourself, how you interacted with others, how you spent your free time here at the library." Elijah's brow furrowed. "So you planned for me to find you here that day?" Thomas shook his head. "No, that was genuine coincidence. I'd chosen this spot because of the library's significance to my own childhood, not knowing it held similar meaning for you. When you appeared in the rain, I recognized you but had no expectation of interaction. Your choice to share your lunch was entirely your own, unprompted, unexpected, and all the more meaningful for it." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small box. I've been thinking about what to give you for your birthday. Material things seem inadequate for the occasion. He handed the box to Elijah. This is something different. Inside lay a simple silver key attached to a compass keychain. Elijah looked up questioningly. The key is symbolic, Thomas explained. It represents my commitment that you will always have a home with me, regardless of where life takes you. The compass is to remind you that even as you navigate your own path, you have a fixed point to return to whenever needed. Emotion tightened Elijah's throat. He closed his fingers around the key, its metal warm against his palm. Thank you, he managed. There's one more thing, Thomas continued. I'm establishing a foundation, the Shared Lunch Foundation. Its mission will be providing educational support and mentorship to children in care. You'll have a seat on the youth advisory board if you want it, to help shape its direction. Elijah stared. You're naming it after. After a moment that changed my perspective entirely, Thomas nodded. Sometimes the smallest gestures reveal the greatest truths about humanity. He looked out across the city thoughtful. You know, when I began my street experiment, I thought I was seeking to understand others better. What I didn't anticipate was how clearly I would see myself, my assumptions, my privileges, my blind spots. And I certainly never expected to find family. Elijah followed his gaze, seeing the cityscape differently now, not as a place of institutions and limitations, but as a landscape of possibilities. I never expected it either, he admitted. Finding family, I mean, Thomas smiled. Life rarely follows the story we think we're in, does it? 3 months ago, I was a solitary millionaire contemplating mortality. You were an orphan sharing your lunch with a stranger. Now here we sit, planning a future neither of us imagined. Do you think... Elijah hesitated, gathering courage. Do you think my mom would be okay with this? With us? Thomas considered the question with appropriate gravity. I can't claim to know her thoughts, Elijah. But as a parent myself now, new as I am to the role, I believe what most mothers want for their children is safety, opportunity, and love. If our arrangement provides those things, then yes, I think she would approve. They sat in comfortable silence, watching people climb the library steps, each carrying their own invisible stories of loss and hope and unexpected connections. Ready to go home? Thomas asked eventually. Elijah nodded. The word home, no longer abstract or institutional, but concrete and personal, a place where he belonged not because of circumstance or charity, but because of a simple lunch shared in the rain and everything that had grown from that single act of kindness. As they stood to leave, Elijah paused, looking back at the alcove where their paths had first crossed. You know, he said thoughtfully, you could have just donated money to St. Catherine's or started a foundation without all of this, without pretending to be homeless, without meeting me. Thomas considered this with a nod. I could have. It would have been simpler, certainly. A tax-deductible check and a press release about corporate responsibility. His eyes crinkled at the corners. But then I would have missed the most important lesson, which was that true connection can't be purchased or arranged. It happens in unguarded moments when we're most authentically ourselves. He placed a gentle hand on Elijah's shoulder. I went looking for insight into others' lives and unexpectedly found the missing piece in my own. Not a bad return on investment for half a peanut butter sandwich, wouldn't you say? Elijah smiled, fingers still wrapped around the key in his pocket. Definitely worth it. They descended the steps together, leaving the library behind but carrying its significance with them. The place where an orphan shared his lunch with a beggar, not knowing the beggar was a millionaire in disguise, nor suspecting how completely that single act of kindness would transform both their lives.